Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to the Embrace the Face podcast, where we celebrate all things weird and wonderful. I'm Allie Anderson, your host, nurse, Reiki master, psychic medium, mom, wife, keeping it real from Long Island, New York. Here to talk about all things self-healing and ascension with special guests or at times solo. May you know that all that you need is in your soul. Happy listening and happy healing. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another episode of Embrace the Face, where I have a very special guest for you guys today. I have Miss Mallary Tenore Tarpley. Thank you, Mallary, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I'm so honored to have Mallary here. Mallary is a mom, a journalism professor at UT Austin. She's obviously a writer. She's a teacher. She is a speaker. However, she is here because of her big debut, and I'm really just so excited to share this. So, Mallary is the author of Slip, a memoir eating disorder recovery book. Is that how it is described? So, this book is I personally, for those who listen in, and those who know me, I've dedicated 7 years of my life to healing, and I am a quote unquote, because of you, a now I learn, a middle place binge eater, and I own that. I accept that. I think that your work is beautiful, and what you are doing is so needed in this world for so many, for all ages, all walks of life, all over the globe. And your work has been featured in general, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Dallas Morning News. So I want you to take this time, please, Mallary, to share your story. The stage is yours, as little or as much as you'd like.
Well, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I'm so glad that you can see yourself reflected in my work. That's my ultimate hope as a writer, is that people will read what I've written and see themselves reflected in it. So I wrote this book largely because I didn't see myself reflected in a lot of the books on eating disorders. And I found that most of the books were written from the perspective of people who were fully recovered, as opposed to people who were still in recovery and navigating the ups and downs and ebbs of flow of recovery. And I found myself really feeling like there was this lack of a mirrored image, and that left me feeling really alone and misunderstood. And so I thought, how might I write a book about this idea of what I call the middle place, which is essentially this liminal space between acute sickness and full recovery. And it took me a long time to get to this idea of the middle place because, just by way of background, I essentially was 8 years old when my mom was developed or diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. And at the time, my family really held on to hope that she was going to be okay, but the cancer metastasized to her bone marrow and her liver and her brain. And even then, we still thought she's going to be okay. But she did end up dying when she was 40 and when I was 11. And it felt like my whole world had crumbled at that time. And I didn't know how to grapple with it. So I handled it the best way I knew how, which was to put on a happy face and to pretend that I was okay. So I went to school the day after she died and I wrote the eulogy for her funeral, didn't cry at all. I was just sort of spouting off these inspirational words to other people and told them, it's okay, we can move on, we have to be strong. But I really didn't know what strength meant, and I didn't know what it really meant to grieve. And the more time passed, the farther I felt from my mother. And so I found myself wanting to stop time and also found myself wanting to stay small because I thought maybe if I stayed the same size my mother was when she was alive, I could somehow be closer to her. And at the same time, I was taking a seventh grade health class where I was learning about quote unquote good foods and bad foods and learning about sort of the fact that you could lose weight if you cut out calories. I mean, it was just crazy to think that we were learning about this in middle school, but that gave me these ideas that what I put into my body could change the way it looked. So I began to restrict my food intake, and it was almost this warped form of time travel where I was really thinking maybe this will make me closer to my mother if I can just stay small and I don't grow. And naturally, the things that we think food restriction will give us often end up sort of stripping it away from us entirely. So I ended up really falling deep into anorexia nervosa and ended up feeling more out of control than ever and farther than ever from my mother. And I was diagnosed officially when I was 13 years old. I spent many years in and out of treatment. So I was hospitalized 5 times, twice on a medical unit, 3 times in the psychiatric ward, which is where eating disorder patients often went. And at the time was struggling with a lot of comorbidities like anxiety and depression and obsessive compulsive disorder. So I was really grappling with a lot and was just in this cycle of rotating in and out, and ended up having to go to residential treatment for a year and a half. And so was there and really made meaningful strides in my recovery, and finally began to grieve the loss of my mother, which was a big part of my recovery. But when I left treatment, I really was intent on essentially sort of reaching the gold standard of full recovery. And yet I didn't really know what that meant. I just thought it meant that I was supposed to be perfect at my eating and exercise just the right amount and lead all the student organizations in my high school and graduate top of my class. I did all those things, right? And I thought, well, if this is what full recovery looks like, then I'm getting an A plus. But then fast forward 2 years later, my freshman year of college, I binged for the first time. And I had never binged before. I'd never eaten a large amount of food and felt really out of control. And so I was scared, and I thought, well, I'm just not going to eat the next day and then I'll get back on track. But that then sort of launched me into this decade-long cycle of binging and restricting. And during this time, I felt like I was failing at anorexia and failing at recovery. And anytime I would slip, I'd think, well, I blew it. I've got to just, might as well just sort of keep slipping. I'm not going to reach full recovery anyway. And I kept really silent about this and kept telling people I was fully recovered when really I wasn't. And then it wasn't until years later when I was working with journalists to help them tell what I called restorative narratives, which are these stories that kind of look at the messy middle of trauma and tragedy. It wasn't until I began working with journalists to tell those stories that it occurred to me that that could be a really helpful framework for my own story. So I began to think about what would it look like to reframe my recovery and not sort of continue to strive for full recovery and the perfectionistic ideal of that, but to really find beauty in this idea of the middle place and to look at slips not as grounds for failure, but as opportunities for growth. And so that reframing of recovery is really what helped me to move out of that cycle and to move forward in my recovery. And so now, all these years later, I am better, but I'm still not all better. And I still live with my disorder's imprints, and it's still very much a vulnerability. So I still see myself in this middle place. And I still see recovery as something that I really have to work at. But in some ways, that keeps me grounded and it motivates me to keep moving forward.
I I don't even know what to say. I think you saw me tearing up. Like um thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I don't think I've ever cried like this on my
Oh.
podcast. There's beauty in your vulnerability and your ability to admit your truths and where you are in your life. I think it's so synchronistic how your life, like if you look at your life, how it played out and your struggles, and then you went into journalism and now here you are, like it led you somewhere to be able to do all this research and get a grant. I read you got a very prestigious grant to be able to do all of this. And first of all, no 11-year-old should ever have to go through like that. Is just heart wrenching to have to go through that. So I'm so sorry. Um, I I don't know that we have talked about this. I did at one point work at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina, a world-renowned establishment inpatient facility for eating disorders. And I would often be my 12-hour shift. I would often be put in the pediatric psych ward, the
Mhm.
locked unit, the ER, and it taught me just so much about life. And just bringing back those memories and how helpless it felt as a nurse. I can only imagine as the human going through it. Um, takes a toll, body, mind, spirit, and you are a warrioress, and you are a beautiful soul, and you are just, you're going places. Like you have a mission. Like I try to teach people like to look within and see who they are, and look within and you shall see all you are meant to be. And like you're doing that, and you're doing it so beautifully and eloquently. And just thank you for being you. And
Oh, thank you.
do you want to talk about how, so I, as I was doing my own little journalistic research, you have a ton of reviews already, and your book comes out August 5th. So let's talk a little bit about, I want to hear it because I love evidence-based research. So how was that fun for you? Like what was that journey like in creating this amazing book?
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, it was a lot of fun to be able to write this book. I mean, it was really difficult in points as well, especially when I was trying to just excavate my own past and re inhabit my younger self. I had to go through all my old medical records and journals that I kept. And so I had to really try to make sure I was re inhabiting the past, but not getting stuck there. And so I did go back to therapy when I was writing this book just to make sure I was taking care of myself. But in the process of looking at my own story, I was also doing a lot of research and reporting because I originally conceived of this book as being just a straightforward memoir that would follow my own story. But then it occurred to me that in many ways I fit the stereotypical mold of someone with an eating disorder, and that I'm white, I identify as female, I live in a smaller body, I'm middle to upper class. And I thought, I want other perspectives to be woven into this book because there's so many people who struggle with eating disorders of all ages and genders and races and ethnicities and all body types, and we don't hear their stories enough. And so for me, it was really important to really expand the lens beyond my own story. So I ended up surveying 724 people with lived experience from around the world, and I interviewed 175 survey respondents and clinicians and researchers. And that for me was so eye opening because I thought that I knew a lot about eating disorders. But then once I started doing all these interviews and reading the research, I thought, wow, there's so much fascinating work that's being done to try to understand eating disorders. And there's been so many evolutions in terms of eating disorder treatment. And so in the book, I was able to bring all of that together. And it was also really comforting because in hearing other people's stories, I realized I wasn't alone because for the longest time, I thought that I was the only person in this middle place, which seems wild because I look at it now and I think, how could I have thought that? But I have a lot of empathy for my younger self because it makes sense that I would have felt alone because nobody talks about this middle place. It is this place that is often shrouded in secrecy and shame. And in a society that really prefers stories about people who triumph and prevail, it can be really hard to say, I haven't triumphed over my disorder or I haven't overcome my disorder. And so I think in some ways it feels like an act of courage to be able to say that you're in the middle place. And when I surveyed all these individuals, 85% of them said that they could identify with this idea of the middle place. And so I thought, okay, there is something here. Like, this is a very populous place. We need to be talking about it more. And so to be able to bring all of these different voices into the book was really helpful. And I do include perspectives from people who consider themselves fully recovered, but there's a lot of perspectives of people who are very much in this middle place, trying to navigate it, trying to figure out how do I keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And did you find that that most people are open to being honest about their journey? When I feel like when you sit with people, because you're so open, you're just going to receive all the vulnerability from them.
Yeah, I was amazed by how many people were willing to share their stories with me because I interviewed these folks who I didn't know, and they were pouring their hearts out to me and sharing their story with me. And some of them had said that they never actually really talked with anyone about their eating disorder. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, it just is a reminder of how silent these struggles can be. And I think that part of why they felt open and talking with me is because I was really vulnerable with them. So I was sharing just my own story and telling them about my thoughts on the middle place. And so I think that for those who found themselves in this space, that gave them permission to be able to share their story, but it also gave them the words to be able to describe where they were at, because many of them said that this place felt ineffable. They didn't have the words to describe it. And so they loved that I was trying to give a name to this place. So I think that that was just really validating to hear
I
that.
think you've coined a new phrase in our world. So kudos to you. I personally, like I said, I've worked the last 7 years from an energy healing aspect. You know, when we are helping others, we too are receiving healing. So know that you're always receiving, you know, that love and light as well. And I remember years ago reading a book, and this particular author said, if you are it was about living in the 5D, the fifth dimension, so that dimension of love and non-duality, right, where we want to be. And it said, if you are sitting at home eating a pint of ice cream every night, then you are not living 5D. Like, you've failed, basically.
Mm.
I have not forgotten that, because ice cream to me, so we do, as you said, you went back to therapy, like you work on, we go to the root cause, right? You clearly are self-aware enough, you've gone to the root cause, you're working on it, you're a work in progress. As am I. I preach self-healing and ascension, and I still am in the middle place, and I still do get triggered, and I have that one hit of ice cream, I have a Twizzler, ice cream and Twizzlers. Everything else in my life, I have gotten rid of. Ice cream and Twizzlers for me will send me into a deep spiral for like weeks. I
Mm.
have gastroparesis, and which means you get full quickly. You can potentially throw up just from eating too much in general. I have healed this tremendously over the latter few years, but if I binge, I will induce myself to being sick. And there is nothing like trying to be in this world of healing yourself and healing others and still getting caught in these low vibrational states, essentially, of our own inner turmoil, and how, you know, you come out of it always learning, always growing, always being kind to yourself and giving yourself grace, and not saying, okay, well, I messed up, I'm just gonna it gets a little bit easier every time to step back into your power. I think, I don't know if you feel that way when you're in that middle place, when you kind of slip and you're like, okay. I'm also not a drinker. I gave up drinking 4.5 years ago, and I tried a bajillion times to quit drinking, and then one day it finally worked. Now that's a totally different slip, but I feel like it's that neurochemistry that and everybody always says, so I work in a ketamine clinic once a week currently for neuroplasticity, mental health, and chronic pain. And you know, it's all about reframing, right? Reframing. So I always tell people that, like, just have grace with yourself, have kindness. The neuroplasticity does work. Keep telling yourself the loving and kindness affirmations. Keep doing the work. Keep journaling. Keep getting it out. Get that energy out. What is causing this? What is accumulating? What do you need to do in order to work through this? And I don't know. I just feel like it's all just really being honest with yourself, and
Mm.
knowing what you need to do in order to heal from within and without, above and below. Um,
Yes, I love that.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could talk about this stuff like all day long. So I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to come on and share your story.
Yes, I know. I think it's so important when we can share our slips, and I think that it's really validating when we hear other people talk about their slips. If we are only ever hearing stories about people who are fully recovered, then I think it silences the huge amount of people who find themselves in this sort of gray space that is often nameless. And so I think if we can kind of destigmatize just the messiness of the recovery process, then all the better. And I think about this idea of the middle place as really being an apt metaphor for so many other aspects of life too. too, because I think about it with regard to grief as well. And I think about how it's been almost 30 years since my mom passed away, but I am not over her death. I don't know that I'll ever be over it. I never stopped missing her. I haven't ever arrived at this place of closure. And for a long time, there was this idea that there were these 5 stages of grief, which really pegged grief as something that was very linear, that had a finite end. And really, I think grief is more cyclical. I think that it ebbs and flows depending on life's transitions. So when I became a mom, for instance, I found myself just really mourning the loss of my own mother again. And the weight of that loss felt so heavy. But then there have been other times where I feel like I'm coasting along a little bit more and I think about my mom from time to time, but I don't feel the weight of that grief quite as much. But I still carry it. It's still a little burden on my shoulder. And so I find that I'm in the middle place when it comes to my grief and my loss. And so I think that that can be really important as we think about the fact that we don't necessarily have to arrive at full recovery with a capital F and capital R to be loved or accepted or to be worthy of celebration, nor do we have to arrive at this sense of closure when it comes to grief and loss. So I think it's important for us to remind ourselves of that. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. I think there really is. Mhm. Yeah, so I think that part of it comes down to, I mean, there's so many different elements of recovery and it will play out, of course, differently for everyone. But one thing that I think can be really helpful is beginning to recognize the parts of your identity that you want to reconnect with, because so many people with eating disorders come to define themselves as their eating disorder. I remember very distinctly that I used to think, okay, I have anorexia. And then at a certain point, when I was in the throes of my anorexia, I began to say, I am anorexic, right? It really became just tangled up in my identity to the point where I couldn't really see myself beyond the eating disorder. And I stopped socializing. I stopped doing the things I loved, like reading and writing. And really, it was just sort of me and my eating disorder. And it was the whole story. Everything else had been pushed to the margins. And so part of my recovery was trying to figure out what are the other parts of my identity that I want to reconnect with. And I think that can be really helpful for anyone who is still sick or who is in the early stages of the recovery to ask, what parts of myself do I want to honor and reconnect with? And now, when I think about my identity, if it were a pie, the eating disorder still takes up a slice of that pie. So it's still there, but there are a lot of other slices of that pie, right? Sort of the ones you mentioned earlier: mother, professor, friend, wife, daughter. And so to be able to connect with those aspects of my identity has been really helpful. I think too, part of just recovery is also learning to see the eating disorder not as the solution, but as the problem. Because for many of us, we do turn to eating disorder behaviors as a way of coping with life, right? Or with trauma, or with grief, or with tragedy. And so for me, being able to reframe my thinking around that, and to think of all that the eating disorder just threatened to take away from me, was really important and impactful. I will also say too that I think it's really important to just unpack the nuances of your eating disorder, especially in terms of how it came to be. So this is a little bit just more abstract, but for me, I always used to say that my eating disorder started after my mom died and that her death caused my eating disorder. But then as I began to write this book, I began to unpack all of the other influences that were at play. And so, for instance, the health class was one of them. I was also thinking as a journalist about just the media influences in my life at the time. And I went back and I looked at the first issue of 17 magazine that I had ever read, because my dad got me a subscription to the magazine after my mother passed away. And the cover story of that first issue I ever read was titled "Girls Who Exercise Themselves to Death." And it was a story about girls with anorexia. And I ended up buying the copy of that issue and some other issues on eBay and reread that story. And parts of it were sort of coming back to me. And so I thought, there are so many different influences at play here, alongside all of sort of the suppressed grief and other things. And really sort of diving into all the different factors that played into the eating disorder was important, because to recover, I needed to be able to kind of unpack those and explore them. And so that was important for me, just as it's been important for me to unpack the nuances of my recovery. I used to say, well, I started my recovery after I was in residential treatment, and that's really sort of what made me sort of be in a better place in my recovery. Then I began to unpack that more, and I thought, well, that helped me on my recovery, but it didn't sort of, make me fully recovered. And I had to really kind of think through, like, what are all the different elements that have played into my recovery? And there's been so many, right? It's hard to name just one. But I think being willing to go there and kind of unpack oversimplified narratives about our eating disorders origin story and also our recovery stories can be really helpful. Yes. Oh. I would just say to kind of honor where you're at in your recovery and to try to aim for more recovery. For me, that's been a more helpful way of thinking about recovery. Certainly the middle place, but within the middle place, how can you try to achieve more recovery? It doesn't have to be the fullest expression of it, right? But more recovery day by day could lead to a fuller expression of recovery. And so maybe it's a matter of just realizing, okay, I'm feeling triggered right now. Maybe I want to fall back into an obsessive exercise habit that I used to do when I was acutely sick. What can I do instead? I'm going to choose to go for a walk instead, right? And recognizing those moments where you're choosing recovery over the disorder. And maybe that more recovery is just a 0.5% one day, right? But it's still worth celebrating, right? Maybe other days it's more like 10%. But I think a lot of times we discredit just these little choices that we make because we think, oh, well, that wasn't a big big deal. But I think that every choice you make in service of more recovery is worth celebrating. Yes, yeah, you can pre-order, and yeah, pre-orders really help authors. So I hope that your listeners will check it out. And although it's largely about eating disorders, it's also about recovery and motherhood and grief. So I think there'll be a lot of points of relatability for folks. It has. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I often thought, well, when I become a mom, then maybe I'll become fully recovered because I used to like to think about these beautiful bookends of my story. And I thought, well, if my eating disorder started after my mom died, then maybe I'll become fully recovered once I become a mom. But that certainly didn't happen, right? That was too sort of tidy of an ending that I had envisioned. And I find that motherhood challenges me in new and different ways. And in some ways, it's helped me to move forward in the middle place, but it's also helped me to be more cognizant of the struggles that I still face. And I work really hard on those so that I don't end up sort of exposing my kids to harmful thoughts around food and their bodies. And so it's interesting because I've thought a lot about motherhood lately because I just turned 40, which is the same age my mother was. Thank you. My mom was 40 when she passed away. So I've just been really thinking a lot about these questions of what does it mean to be a good mom? And what does it mean to outlive your mother? How do you begin this next phase of life that your mother never got to experience? So raising my children and putting this book out into the world at this moment in time feels particularly special as a mom. Mhm.
I love how self-aware you are of knowing when you are slipping, what is the correlation, because we all have that, and it's emotion is involved in a lot of our day to day. Like we are humans. It's what makes us feeling is what makes us a human being while we are having this spiritual being experience here on earth, right? We're trying to figure out who we are, what we're doing here, and all these things that are coming and maybe deterring us also are meant to, I feel like at the end of the day, all these externals, they're all coming together in one path to bring us to like that soul mission, that soul calling, being in alignment with who you are. I just remembered that I wanted to tell you this. My mother was the sixth grade health teacher, the elementary. I will have to ask her. She's retired now, but I will have to ask her. I mean, this is going back. She also dressed up as the puberty fairy too. She taught about puberty. Yeah. But I'm so curious because it's all these little things that lead us, right? They lead us to who we are, and recognizing those little T's or the big T's that have affected us in life. Um, I just I think that when you honor not being perfect in a world that expects perfection, there's something liberating about that. There's something, and I think that's what your message is going to help people with, to know you're not alone, to know, and that's similar with the drinking program that I did as well. I didn't do Alcoholics Anonymous, but they talk about the gray area of drinking. There's so many gray areas. It's not black and white. Nothing needs to be black and white, and we need to honor that. And what is so the episode that actually I had heard from your marketing rep was when I did an episode with Angela Gladkowski on nutrition, and we talked about these small incremental changes that one can make throughout their life. Based on all of your research and data, is there any wisdoms that you would like to share with others in what are some specific small incremental changes for this genre that someone can do for themselves? Getting to the nitty gritty. Literally going to the very first moment. That's amazing. That is like true healing right there. You went straight to the source of your, just what you remember to be the way that that path took you. That is, you're so brave. And thank you for that insight. Yeah, it really is about just getting to that root. So I feel like that's a message that keeps coming back today, getting to that root, recognizing what may bring us into a slip, but also remaining resilient and kind, and just thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And I very much look forward to reading your book and sharing it with others. And are there any last words of wisdom that you have for anyone? Yes, always worth celebrating. Every little moment, every little bit, and being proud of ourselves, and holding that frequency. I always go back to the energy, holding that frequency, holding ourselves in that place of reverence for ourselves and all we're capable of, and limitless. We are capable of limitless potential in this life. So thank you again for coming on. I will share all of your contact information. I'll share your book information. Can buy anywhere, right? Can pre-order. Okay. Yes, I love that you're a mom too. Just authentically living. And just to say, is this has being a mom in this role that you've been in the book that you're writing, has it made you more just consciously present and not as hard on yourself, watching yourself in the mom role? Oh, mhm. Oh, happy birthday. Oh, I have total chills right now, total body chills. That is so beautiful. And in a life, a type of life that I do not personally know, but I the way that you go about it is just so beautifully in flow. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and happy birthday. May this be your best trip around the sun yet, and may this book just, let's put it out to the universe that this book is going to be a bestseller, and you are going to receive all the abundance, but most importantly, the world is going to hear your message. So thank you, Mallary. Thank you, thank you. Everybody listening, please look out for Mallary, follow her, and buy her book coming out August 5th. Peace out, and God bless. Hello, hello, beautiful souls. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. This is Allie Anderson, your host. I wanted to bring you a little bit of everything for your highest good self-healing and ascension that I have going on at Embrace the Face LLC for this summer season. Summer season, summer solstice is my favorite time of year. It is the time that we open our heart to the spirit of the South, and we ask for Mother Earth to channel through our heart chakras, her Sami, her healing and rejuvenating energy and regenerative energy. And we ask that she take our hucha, our negative energy, that which no longer serves us, so we can feel revitalized and reinvigorated as we go throughout the summer months. So at Embrace the Face LLC, I have lots of goodies for your self-healing and ascension. So for starters, as we head into halfway through the year, it is not too late to get your copy of your 2025 astrological planner and journal. This is my second annual creation that I've self-published for your highest good. So every month, we have an astrological calendar, a full annual calendar for 2025 with monthly mantras, monthly goals for body, mind, spirit, and some notes. And then the piece de resistance of this book really is the daily tap-in page. So this is all evidence-based techniques to bring you to center, bring you to alignment, feeling in a place of homeostasis, that nervous system state, the parasympathetic nervous system state where you want to reside. And evidence does show that if you wake and really tap as you wake up in the morning and you tap into your own energies, it'll bring you to a sense of peace and calm and remembering who you are, why you're here, and what your mission is to fulfill on this earth. So in doing so, you can do brief gratitude journaling, your emotional state. You can track your menstrual cycle, or if you don't have, you can simply follow the phases of Luna. Subconscious dream recording. Our dreams are always telling us messages and things that we need to work on in our now. So you can pay attention by tracking these. And then your daily priorities and self-care. So evidence shows that if you pick 3 things every day to tackle and 3 major projects a week to tackle, that it will leave you feeling fulfilled and a sense of just accomplishment at the end of the day and week. Always reminding you to give yourself a little bit of extra love and self-care. I also have going on, if you miss the 5-day psychic challenge, if you sign up for replays, I would be happy to give you the 5-day challenge for free. This is a high ticket item that I spent a full week in going through each clair, and each clair, we have 8 clairs, so our just extrasensory perception. We talked about how to tap in into each innate clair that you have within you. You have this gift within you. So each day we tapped into the clairs to bring you clarity, to bring you healing, and to bring you just techniques and tips and tools to bring you into your highest timeline so that you may live in flow, feeling high vibe, and just being confident and trusting your intuition and being able to discern fear versus intuition. And that is the ultimate goal. So I would be happy to send those to you. If you are still listening in, thank you so much. And you have not already subscribed to the podcast on Embrace the Face, which is on all your favorite listening platforms. If on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you wouldn't mind leaving a 5-star review. And if you're able to write a comment, and please then screenshot your rating or review, send it to me, and I will be happy to give you full access to my digital courses for free. I have Chakras 101, and I also have the 6 pillars of self-healing and ascension. These 2 evidence-based digital courses are at a value of $22, and I am always forever eternally grateful for all those who tune in and listen, and would be even more so grateful to those who could take the time to to please rate and review the Embrace the Face podcast. Every single one means so, so much to my heart. Thank you. I also have my fire cider. So fire cider, my first official mass-produced batch will be ready in early July. I already have sold out that entire batch, so I just made a second batch which will be ready in August. So if you are interested, I can ship globally. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me via email or social media to place your inquiry or order for fire cider. I also have a few herbal loose leaf tea concoctions coming your way, so keep a lookout. These specific teas have helped me to self-heal and ascend, one in particular being CCF cumin, coriander, and fennel, which is an ancient Ayurvedic tea that is meant to awaken your Agni, your digestive fire, awaken your metabolism and all your tissues when drank on an empty stomach first thing in the morning or even after lemon water. Evidence-based as well. And last but not least, I have the Jamaican Soul Revival Retreat, Yaman, in Ocho Rios, Jamaica. My family and I have gone to Jamaica almost 10 times we have been. And we are returning in a few weeks to go and scope out the property and to just enjoy the area. With that being said, I have reserved a home on the Caribbean Sea, a luxury private home with private security, house staff, a chef, and private transportation. The retreat is from January 29th to February 2nd, so it will be a weekend. It is full of spiritual quantum healing ceremonies, daily meditation, movement, and breath work. As organic food as possible or as nutritious foods as possible. There is going to be live entertainment nightly with music. We are going to go to a ganja plantation that is in the area where we're going to learn all about cannabis and its healing nature and how it's grown. We are then going to each have massages. Everyone is going to get some spiritual healing, some quantum metaphysical ancient healing, and there is option for a round of golf to be played at Sandals Upton Golf Club. And that would be extra. The retreat information is on my website, which I will include in the podcast information, the caption, if you want to check it out. Any inquiries, please do not hesitate. And if you would like more details, please reach out at any time. So I appreciate you all so, so much listening in and hearing all that I have going on at Embrace the Face. As always, I always have my basic psychic readings and Reiki healing appointments available. I have my deep dive hotspot healing sessions, which are 90-minute one-on-one sessions where we really deep dive in more than just a psychic reading or Reiki healing. We really deep dive into the quantum, metaphysical, ancient healing techniques, as well as trauma healing and things that will bring you neuroplasticity to help you rewire your brain and to bring you into that highest timeline version of you that you envision for yourself while collapsing the old and bringing in the new. All you have to do is look within so you may see all that you are meant to be. Thank you all so, so much for being here, for listening in, and for supporting me. If you wanted to deep dive even further, you could join my 3-month Soul Revival Healing Container, where those neuroplastic effects and lifelong habit changes do take place at that 3-month mark, allowing you to go off and fulfill your mission in the way that you know how, from heart center and always being grounded, connected, and protected. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Peace out and God bless, as always.